The diplomatic facade. The Galactic Trade Assembly occupied a massive space station that floated in neutral territory between 12 major star systems. The station had been built over 2 centuries, a joint effort by species who had learned that cooperation was more profitable than conflict. At least that's what most of them believed. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the human transport ship Olive Branch, watching the station grow larger in the viewport. She had made this journey 47 times in her 15-year career as a diplomatic envoy. Each time she hoped it would be different. Each time she left disappointed. Elena was tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen too many negotiations end in frustration. She wore the standard gray uniform of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, adorned only with a small pin showing Earth's blue marble against black space. No medals, no rank insignia beyond her captain's bars. Humans preferred to look humble. "Captain, we're receiving docking clearance from Assembly Control," her pilot announced. Lieutenant James Park was young, barely 25, and still believed that diplomacy could solve everything. Elena envied his optimism. "Take us in, Lieutenant. Standard approach, no sudden movements. Let's not give anyone an excuse to be nervous." The Olive Branch glided into its assigned docking bay with practiced ease. Through the viewport, Elena could see other ships from dozens of species. The insectoid Verthari arrived in vessels that looked like crystallized honeycombs. The aquatic Celestians piloted ships filled with water, visible through transparent hulls. The Threxians commanded massive warships that dwarfed every other vessel in the bay. That was the problem. The Threxians always brought warships. Elena gathered her documents and data tablets, checking everything twice. In 40 years since humanity had joined the galactic community, they had built a reputation as the species that never fought back. They negotiated. They compromised. They found middle ground even when it meant giving up things they wanted. Other species had started to see this as weakness. The Threxians saw it as an invitation. The assembly chamber was exactly as Elena remembered it. A vast circular room with seating arranged in tiers, each section modified for different species' environmental needs. The Threxians occupied the largest section, their massive forms requiring extra space and reinforced seating. They were bipedal creatures standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin covered in bony plates. 4 arms sprouted from their torsos and their heads featured prominent crests that changed color with their moods. Supreme Commander Vorgath dominated the Threxian delegation. His crest glowed deep red, a sign of aggression and confidence. He had led the Threxian military for 20 years and had never lost a battle. He didn't plan to start now. Elena took her position at the human delegation platform. She was alone. Earth always sent small delegations, another thing other species interpreted as weakness. They didn't understand that humans believed in efficiency over displays of power. "The Assembly recognizes Captain Elena Vasquez of United Earth," announced the station's AI, its voice simultaneously translated into 47 languages. "Thank you," Elena said, her voice calm and measured. "I'm here to discuss the Threxian Collective's recent military buildup near human mining operations in the Kepler sector." Vorgath's crest flared brighter red. "The Kepler sector is not human territory. Your mining operations exist there by the Assembly's temporary permission, not by right. Permission that was granted 60 years ago and has been renewed every decade since," Elena replied. "Our operations have been peaceful and profitable for all parties involved. We've shared the resources fairly, provided employment for multiple species, and maintained environmental standards that exceed Assembly requirements. And yet you occupy the richest asteroid belt in that sector," Vorgath said, rising to his full imposing height. "The Threxian Collective has expanding needs. We require those resources. You have 7 days to cease operations and evacuate." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some species looked concerned, but most looked away. This was how it always went. The Threxians wanted something, they threatened to take it, and humans gave it up rather than fight. Elena felt the familiar weight of frustration settle on her shoulders. She had delivered this speech so many times she could recite it in her sleep. "Supreme Commander, please reconsider. You don't want to do this. The resources in the Kepler sector are enough for both our species. We can negotiate a fair division. We can establish joint operations. There are solutions that don't require conflict." Vorgath made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Other Threxians joined in, a rumbling that shook the chamber. "Humans and your endless negotiations," Vorgath said. "For 40 years you've talked and given up and given up. You've never fought for anything. You won't start now." Elena glanced around the chamber. The Vrithari representatives were exchanging clicking sounds, probably already calculating how to exploit whatever weakness the Threxians exposed in human defenses. The Celestians floated in their water-filled section, tentacles moving in patterns that suggested intense discussion. The Korvathi, a warrior species that respected strength above all else, watched with expressions that looked like pity. "Supreme Commander," Elena said, and now her voice carried an edge that made several delegates look up in surprise. "I'm asking you, please. Please don't make us do this. Please reconsider your position. You really, truly don't want to make humanity angry." The chamber erupted in noise. Species that could laugh did so. The Threxians' crest blazed with amusement and contempt. "Angry?" Vorgath bellowed. "You speak of anger? You who surrender at every confrontation? You who've never fired a shot in anger since joining this assembly? Your threats are as empty as your courage." Elena stood silently, letting the laughter wash over her. She had tried. She had given them every chance. History would record that humanity had said please. "Very well," she said quietly. "Let the record show that humanity requested peaceful resolution. Let the record show that we warned you. Let the record show that we said please." She touched a control on her wrist device. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. Captain Vasquez, the assembly mediator, said, "A floating species called the Inari, who prided themselves on impartiality. Do you have anything else to add?" "No," Elena said. "I think we're done talking now." She turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet, something about the way she moved, the set of her shoulders, the absolute calm in her voice, made some of the more perceptive species feel uneasy. Vorgath watched her go, his crest pulsing with satisfaction. Another victory without firing a shot. The humans would evacuate within 7 days, and the Threxian collective would claim the richest mining operation in the sector. Other species would see this and know that the Threxians took what they wanted. What Vorgath didn't know was that the signal Elena had sent from her wrist device had just traveled through quantum communication channels to Earth. It was a simple code phrase, "Silent Storm." On Earth, in a military complex buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the Antarctic ice, computers that had been dormant for 4 decades began to wake up. Passwords were entered by the Secretary General of United Earth, a woman named Sarah Morrison, who had hoped her entire career that she would never need to speak those passwords aloud. Authorization Morrison 77 Alpha. Confirm activation of Protocol Silent Storm. Authorization confirmed, the computer replied. Activating military reserves. Estimated time to full deployment, 72 hours. Around Earth's solar system, in the asteroid belt on the dark side of the moon, in the depths of the oceans, facilities that had been sealed since first contact began to open. Shipyards that had built cargo vessels for 40 years remembered how to build warships. Factories that produced mining equipment retooled their assembly lines overnight. Weapons that had been locked away were loaded onto ships. In the Kepler sector, human mining operations began orderly evacuations. 50,000 workers and their families boarded transport ships, taking only essential belongings. They left behind billions of credits worth of equipment, fully functional facilities, years of infrastructure development. They left it all behind without complaint. The Threxians interpreted this as confirmation of human weakness. They didn't notice that as the last human transport departed, the mining station's power cores were quietly set to countdown sequences. They didn't detect the small objects being positioned throughout the asteroid belt, objects that looked like standard navigation beacons but carried very different purposes. Supreme Commander Vorgath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching the human transports flee. His military fleet had arrived at the Kepler sector right on schedule. 500 warships, the largest deployment of Threxian military force in a generation. All of it to claim a mining operation that humans had abandoned without resistance. Deploy the occupation forces, Vorgath commanded. Take control of all facilities. I want mining operations resumed within 48 hours. Threxian soldiers descended to the asteroid bases in assault shuttles. They found empty corridors, abandoned equipment, and complete silence. The facilities were pristine, as if the humans had simply walked away mid-shift. It was eerie, but Vorgath dismissed the feeling. Humans were cowards. This was just more proof. Then the lights went out. Every facility went dark simultaneously. Power cores that had run flawlessly for decades suddenly shut down. Life support systems failed. Communications arrays went dead. Threxian soldiers found themselves trapped in bases that had become tombs, surrounded by useless technology. What happened? Vorgath demanded. Get those systems back online. Sir, the humans have locked us out. Every system has triple encrypted security. Our engineers say it would take months to break through. Then bypass the security. Use our own power generators. We're trying, sir, but the facilities are designed to reject any unauthorized power source. The safeties override the safeties. As Threxian engineers frantically tried to make the captured facilities functional, Vorgath's sensors detected something approaching. Multiple objects moving fast. Identify those contacts, he ordered. Sir, they appear to be asteroids, roughly 100 of them, ranging from 50 to 200 meters in diameter. They're on collision courses with our occupied bases. Vorgath felt the first stirring of unease. Asteroids don't change course naturally. Someone is guiding them. Yes, sir. They're equipped with thruster assemblies. They've been accelerating for days. Vorgath's crest shifted to orange, a color indicating confusion. That means they were launched before we even arrived. Before the humans evacuated. The asteroids fell from the sky like judgment. They struck the mining bases with tremendous force, obliterating years of infrastructure in seconds. The Threxian soldiers barely escaped with their lives, scrambling into their assault shuttles and fleeing the destruction. Vorgath watched the display showing feeds from dozens of bases simultaneously being destroyed. Billions of credits worth of equipment vanishing in explosive impacts. The humans had destroyed their own colony rather than let the Threxians have it. Pull back all ground forces, he ordered. All ships prepare for defensive formations. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's from a human vessel. A holographic image appeared on the bridge. It showed a human in military uniform, a man with steel gray hair and eyes that reminded Vorgath of predators. The name badge on his uniform read, Admiral Marcus Chen, Earth Defense Force. Supreme Commander Vorgath, Chen said, his voice carrying none of Elena's diplomatic softness. You were warned. Multiple times. You were asked politely to reconsider. You chose not to listen. You destroyed your own bases, Vorgath said, trying to sound confident despite the unease growing in his chest. You've accomplished nothing except costing yourselves billions. We accomplished exactly what we intended, Chen replied. We removed assets you wanted to claim. But that's just the beginning. You see, Commander, humanity has been very patient for 40 years. We've negotiated when we could have fought. We've compromised when we could have taken. We've said please again and again and again. Chen leaned forward, and his expression made Vorgath's crest shift to yellow, a color the Supreme Commander hadn't displayed since he was young. We're done saying please now, Chen said. You wanted to see what humanity looks like when we stop being polite. You're about to find out. I suggest you recall your fleet and return to Threxian space. You have 24 hours, or what? Vorgath demanded. Your fleet is small. Your military is minimal. We outnumber you 50 to 1, do you? Chen asked. Are you sure about that? The transmission ended. Vorgath stared at the empty hologram space, his crest cycling through colors as his emotions shifted. Fear, anger, confusion, determination. He turned to his tactical officer. Show me all human ship movements in this sector. The tactical display lit up. It showed the expected human transports fleeing toward Earth. It showed a small patrol group of maybe 20 human military vessels maintaining distance. Then, the display updated as better sensor data came. Through Vorgath's crest turned white, a color that indicated absolute shock. The human ships weren't small patrol vessels. They were something the Threxians had never seen before. Ships that had been designed for one purpose only: war. They had been hiding in the asteroid field, using stealth technology that made them invisible to standard scans. As they activated their full power systems and dropped their stealth fields, they appeared on sensors like ghosts becoming solid. There weren't 20 ships. There were 200, and more were arriving through jump points, pouring into the system like a flood. How? Vorgath whispered. They said they had no military. They said they were peaceful. His tactical officer's voice shook. Sir, these ships? The database identifies them as pre-contact human designs. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers. These are warship classifications from before humans joined the assembly. We thought they had dismantled all of this. They lied, Vorgath said. No, sir, his intelligence officer said quietly. They never said they didn't have a military. They said they chose not to maintain a large military. They said they preferred negotiation. Those aren't lies. Those are choices. Choices they just stopped making. The human fleet took up positions around the Threxian forces, not attacking, just surrounding them. Vorgath looked at the tactical display and realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. He had believed humanity's peaceful nature was weakness. He had never considered that it might be restraint. Another transmission came through. Admiral Chen again. Supreme Commander, you now have 23 hours and 58 minutes to begin your withdrawal. I strongly suggest you use that time wisely. Because if you're still here when time expires, you're going to learn every lesson humanity learned about warfare over 10,000 years of fighting each other. And Commander, we're very, very good teachers. Vorgath looked at his officers. He saw fear on faces that had never known defeat. For the first time in his career, Supreme Commander Vorgath gave an order he never thought he would speak. All ships, prepare to retreat. The awakening of old Earth. The Threxian fleet did not retreat. Supreme Commander Vorgath spent 6 hours in emergency council with his war chiefs, debating the unprecedented situation. Half urged immediate withdrawal, citing the unknown capabilities of the human fleet. The other half argued that retreating without firing a shot would destroy Threxian credibility across the galaxy. They had built an empire on the principle that strength was everything, that hesitation was weakness. In the end, pride won over prudence. We stand our ground, Vorgath declared. Humanity has hidden ships, yes, but ships are only metal and weapons. They've never used them in combat. They have no experience, no warrior tradition. We do. We've conquered 12 star systems. We've won 100 battles. They've won none. His officers rumbled their agreement, their crests blazing red with renewed confidence. They were Threxians. They did not flee from threats, especially not from species that had spent 40 years proving they lacked the stomach for violence. Vorgath opened a channel to Admiral Chen. Human Admiral, we reject your ultimatum. The Kepler sector now belongs to the Threxian collective. You may posture with your hidden fleet, but we will not be intimidated by ships that have never seen battle. Withdraw or face the consequences. There was a long pause. When Chen responded, his voice carried something that made Vorgath's translator struggle to find the right word. The closest it could manage was resignation. Supreme Commander, I need you to understand something. When Captain Vasquez asked you to reconsider, she wasn't bluffing. When she said you didn't want to make humanity angry, she was giving you accurate intelligence. You had 24 hours to avoid what comes next. You've chosen not to use them. What happens now is on you. Empty words from a species of Chen cut the transmission. Vorgath stared at the dead channel for a moment, then turned to his fleet coordinator. All ships battle formation Delta 7. Prepare to engage on my command. 500 Threxian warships moved into attack formation, a maneuver they had practiced thousands of times. Each ship was a veteran of multiple campaigns. Each crew was trained from birth for warfare. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had no idea what was about to happen. The human fleet did not move into attack formation. They didn't need to. They had already positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be over the previous 6 hours, while the Threxians debated. Admiral Marcus Chen sat in the command center of the UEDS Consequence, a ship that had been built in secret over the past 40 years specifically for this moment. Humanity hoped would never come. Around him, his officers worked with quiet efficiency. There was no shouting, no dramatic declarations. Just professionals doing a job they had trained for but prayed they would never perform. Admiral, all ships report ready, his tactical officer reported. Commander Lisa Zhang had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would remain theoretical. Now it was real, and she felt the weight of that reality in every word she spoke. Initiate protocol cascade, Chen ordered. Authorization Chen 9 Delta 3. Authorization confirmed. Initiating cascade. In the Threxian fleet, nothing seemed to happen at first. Then one by one, ships began reporting problems. Sir, our primary communication array is malfunctioning, a Threxian officer reported. Mine too, another captain confirmed over the fleet channel. All ships reporting communication degradation. Vorgath's coordinator said, her voice rising with concern. Within 3 minutes, every Threxian ship in the system lost the ability to communicate with each other. Their quantum communication systems, the backbone of fleet coordination, simply stopped working. Individual ships could still function, but the fleet was deaf and mute. What did they do? Vorgath demanded. How did they attack our communications? Sir, they didn't attack anything, his chief engineer replied, checking diagnostics frantically. There's no damage, no virus, no interference. The systems just stopped. It's as if someone flipped a switch. Someone had. 40 years ago, when humanity first shared quantum communication technology with the Galactic Assembly, they had included a backdoor in the fundamental protocols, not out of immediate malicious intent, but because humans had learned over millennia that you always kept an ace hidden. Every species in the galaxy used communication systems built on human-designed protocols because humans had offered them freely. Another gesture of goodwill and cooperation. Everyone had forgotten that humans were very, very good at thinking ahead. Switch to backup communication systems, Vorgath ordered. Light-speed transmissions if necessary. The Threxians began reconfiguring their systems, a process that would take hours. They didn't have hours. Sir, detecting massive energy signatures from the human fleet. The human ships weren't firing weapons. They were releasing something else. Millions of tiny objects, each no larger than a fist. They spread through the system like a cloud, moving on tiny thrusters, each one taking up a specific position in a three-dimensional grid that encompassed the entire Threxian fleet. What are those? Vorgath asked. Analyzing. Sir, they appear to be sensor drones. They're scanning us. Scanning for what? Everything, sir. Power signatures, weapon configurations, armor composition, crew locations. They're mapping every ship in our fleet in real time. Admiral Chen watched the data stream in. The drones were providing information more detailed than any tactical scan humanity had ever achieved. He could see the internal layout of every Threxian ship, the location of every reactor, every ammunition store, every life support system. It was information that would make the next phase almost trivial. Sir, the Threxians are powering weapons, Commander Zhang reported. Of course they are, Chen said quietly. They still don't understand. Activate Phase 2. The human fleet finally moved, but not into attack formation. Instead, they scattered, each ship taking up seemingly random positions throughout the system. The Threxian tactical officers couldn't identify any known formation or strategy. Then the asteroids began to move. The Kepler sector was rich in asteroids, thousands of them ranging from pebbles to mountains. Over the past 40 years of mining operations, humans had mapped every single one. They knew their composition, their mass, their orbital characteristics. And over the past 72 hours since Protocol Silent Storm was activated, they had attached engines to 400 of the largest ones. 400 asteroids, each massing between 1,000 and 50,000 tons, began accelerating toward the Threxian fleet. Evasive maneuvers, Vorgath ordered. All ships scatter formation. But scattering was exactly what the humans wanted. A tightly grouped fleet could provide overlapping defensive fire. A scattered fleet was vulnerable. The asteroids weren't aiming for ships. They were aiming for positions, specific points in space where Threxian ships would be in approximately 30 minutes based on their evasive maneuvers. Humans had fed all the data from the sensor drones into AI systems designed for predictive modeling. The same systems that had helped humanity navigate complex weather patterns, predict economic trends, and model social behaviors were now predicting exactly where each Threxian ship would try to flee. The math was devastatingly accurate. The first asteroid impact came 28 minutes later. A Threxian destroyer, trying to avoid 3 incoming asteroids, maneuvered directly into the path of a fourth. The collision wasn't direct. The destroyer's captain managed to partially dodge, but a 50,000-ton rock moving at relativistic speeds didn't need a direct hit. The gravitational shear as it passed ripped the destroyer's hull open like paper. One down, Commander Zhang reported without emotion. 437 to go, Chen replied. Over the next 2 hours, the Threxian fleet was systematically dismantled. Not by weapons fire, but by rocks. Ancient, patient rocks that had been drifting in space for billions of years, now guided by human calculation and human patience into perfect kill zones. Vorgath watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated. Ships collided with asteroids. Ships fled into dead-end trajectories and had to burn all their fuel escaping. Ships were separated from the fleet and found themselves isolated and vulnerable, all without the humans firing a single shot. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How can they predict our movements so accurately?" His tactical officer had figured it out. "Sir, they're not predicting our movements. They're controlling them. Every time we dodge an asteroid, we move into the path of another. They're herding us like animals." It was true. Humanity had learned over thousands of years that the best way to control an enemy wasn't to attack them directly. It was to control their options, to make them choose between bad choices and worse choices until they had no choices left. "All ships, full stop," Vorgath ordered. "Cease evasive maneuvers. Hold position." The Threxian fleet went still, ships hanging in space, hoping that not moving would somehow save them. For a moment it seemed to work. The asteroids drifted past, missing the stationary ships. Then the human fleet opened fire, not with energy weapons or missiles. With kinetic impactors, simple tungsten rods accelerated to tremendous velocities by magnetic rails. They were the oldest weapon in humanity's arsenal, dating back to theoretical designs from the 21st century. They were also unstoppable. The rods tore through Threxian shields like they weren't there. They punched through armor designed to withstand plasma fire. They hit engines, reactors, weapon systems, all the vulnerable points that the sensor drones had mapped hours earlier. In 15 minutes, the Threxian fleet lost its ability to fight. Not its ability to exist, the humans were carefully avoiding life support systems and crew quarters, but its ability to make war. Every ship in the fleet was crippled, drifting, helpless, and the humans stopped firing. Vorgath sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display showing his once mighty fleet reduced to floating wrecks. His crest had turned gray, a color Threxians only displayed in the presence of death. A transmission came through on emergency frequencies, the only channel still working. Admiral Chen's face appeared, and Vorgath finally understood what his translator had failed to capture earlier. It wasn't resignation, it was sorrow. "Supreme Commander, I'm opening humanitarian corridors. Your damaged ships can proceed to the system's edge for pickup by Threxian rescue vessels. We will not fire on evacuation craft. We will provide medical assistance if requested. Your crews will be treated with dignity and respect." "Why?" Vorgath asked, his voice hollow. "Why show mercy now?" "Because this isn't about destroying you," Chen said. "This is about teaching a lesson. You needed to learn that humanity's peaceful nature is a choice, not a weakness. You've learned that now. Your species will remember this for generations. That was the point. You could have told us. You could have demonstrated your capabilities without—" "We tried," Chen interrupted, and now there was steel in his voice. "Captain Vasquez tried. She asked you politely. She warned you explicitly. She said, please. You laughed at her. You laughed at all of us. Did you think we said please because we didn't know how to say no? Did you think we compromised because we didn't know how to fight?" Vorgath had no answer. "Humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare," Chen continued. "We fought with sticks and stones, then bronze and iron, then gunpowder and nuclear fire. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We learned every possible way to hurt each other, and we got very, very good at it. When we met you, when we joined the Galactic Assembly, we made a choice. We chose to be better. We chose peace." Chen leaned forward, his eyes hard. "But choosing peace doesn't mean forgetting war. It means remembering it so well that you'll do anything to avoid it. We said please because we remember what happens when we stop saying please. You forced us to remember out loud." The transmission ended. The human fleet maintained position, guarding the humanitarian corridors but making no further aggressive moves. Threxian rescue ships began arriving, moving cautiously through the designated safe zones, retrieving damaged vessels and wounded crews. Vorgath supervised the evacuation in silence. 500 ships had entered the Kepler sector. 473 were leaving as cripples. 27 had been completely destroyed when their crews panicked and made fatal mistakes trying to escape the asteroid field. 12,000 Threxians were dead. 50,000 more would need months of medical treatment, and the humans had accomplished it all with rocks and mathematics. As his flagship limped toward the system's edge, Vorgath received one final transmission. Not from Admiral Chen, but from Captain Elena Vasquez. She looked tired. Her eyes held the same sorrow Chen's had, but also something else. Vindication, perhaps, or maybe just profound disappointment. Supreme Commander, I want you to understand something. Everything that happened here happened because you didn't listen when I said please. I'm going to keep saying please. Humanity is going to keep choosing diplomacy first. But now, when we say please, I need you and every other species in this galaxy to hear what we're really saying. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When humans say please, we're not asking because we're weak. We're asking because we're strong enough to choose not to fight. We're asking because we remember what we're capable of, and we're trying to save you from finding out. Please means we're giving you a chance to walk away from something terrible. It means we're offering you dignity instead of defeat. Vasquez's expression hardened. You made us take away that choice. You made us show the galaxy what happens when we stop saying please. I hope you never forget it. I hope no one ever forgets it. Because the next time might be worse. The next time we might not be this restrained. The transmission ended. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Trade Assembly convened an emergency session. Every species sent their highest-ranking officials. The chamber was packed with representatives who had spent 40 years dismissing humanity as weak, as cowardly, as inconsequential. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the speaker's platform. Beside her stood Admiral Marcus Chen, present not as a military threat but as a reminder. The message was clear. Humanity came in peace, but peace was a choice they could unmake. The session lasted 6 hours. Species after species stood to condemn the Threxian aggression. Many offered apologies for not supporting humanity's diplomatic efforts earlier. Some proposed new security frameworks. Others suggested mutual defense treaties. Elena let them talk. When the chamber finally fell silent, she spoke. The Kepler sector incident demonstrated something the galaxy needed to understand. Humanity's diplomatic approach over the past 40 years wasn't weakness. It was preference. We prefer negotiation because we're good at it. We prefer compromise because we believe in fairness. We prefer peace because we know exactly what war costs. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had mocked her, dismissed her, ignored her warnings. But preference is not limitation. Choice is not inability. And politeness is not powerlessness. We said please for 40 years. Most of you stopped hearing us. You started thinking please meant we couldn't say no. Admiral Chen stepped forward, his presence a reminder of the fleet still on standby throughout human space. The Threxian collective learned the difference between can't and won't. They learned it the hard way. We'd prefer that no one else needs that lesson. So we're going to keep saying please. We're going to keep negotiating, keep compromising, keep choosing peace first. He paused, and his voice dropped to something that made every translator in the chamber struggle with the tone. But from now on, when humanity says please, we need you to understand what we're really saying. We're saying we're trying to be nice. We're saying we don't want to hurt you. We're saying there's still time to choose a better path. Elena took over again. We're saying please because the alternative is showing you what 40 years of hidden preparation looks like. The alternative is demonstrating 10,000 years of warfare evolution. The alternative is teaching you every lesson humanity learned while nearly destroying itself. She touched a control, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. They showed the Kepler sector incident from multiple angles, the systematic dismantling of a fleet that had seemed unstoppable. They showed the precision, the planning, the cold calculation. They showed what humanity looked like when it stopped being polite. This was restraint, Elena said quietly. This was us pulling our punches. This was us trying to make a point without causing more damage than necessary. If we ever stop showing restraint, if we ever decide that saying please isn't working anymore. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The chamber was silent. Finally, the Inari mediator floated forward, her bioluminescent body pulsing with colors that indicated deep thought. Ambassador Vasquez, Admiral Chen, the Assembly has heard your message. We propose a new charter, one that explicitly recognizes humanity's commitment to peaceful resolution while acknowledging your capability to enforce necessary boundaries. We propose that humanity's diplomatic requests be given greater weight in Assembly deliberations. We don't want special treatment, Elena said. We want the same thing we've always wanted. To be heard when we speak, to be taken seriously when we warn, to have our choices respected instead of dismissed. Then it shall be so, the Inari said. Let this be recorded in the Assembly's permanent record. When humanity says please, the galaxy will listen. The resolution passed unanimously. Even the Threxian delegation, represented now by a chastened junior official since Vorgath had been removed from command, voted in favor. As the session ended and representatives filed out, many approached Elena to offer personal apologies or renewed pledges of cooperation. She accepted them all graciously, professionally. This was, after all, what she had been trying to achieve for 15 years. Admiral Chen stood beside her, watching the politicians do what politicians did. "Do you think they really learned the lesson?" he asked quietly. "Some did," Elena replied. "Some will need reminders. And some—" She trailed off, watching a group of Vrathari representatives clustered in a corner, clicking and chittering to each other. "Some will need to test it themselves before they believe it." "Then we'll be ready," Chen said. "The fleet isn't going back into storage." "Not this time." "No," Elena agreed. "Not this time. We tried hiding our teeth. That just made people think we didn't have any. Now they know we have teeth. Maybe they'll be more careful where they put their fingers." 6 months passed. Humanity returned to saying please. Trade continued. Diplomatic negotiations resumed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to a new reality, where humans were still polite, still willing to compromise, still preferring peace, but now, when Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the Galactic Assembly and said please, everyone listened. They had learned what happened when they didn't. And across the galaxy, in military academies and intelligence briefings and strategic planning sessions, a new lesson was being taught to every species that thought about testing humanity's boundaries. When humans say please, they mean it. Listen to them, because if you make them stop saying please, you'll discover why they were saying it in the first place. The lesson had been expensive. 12,000 Threxian lives, 50,000 wounded, an empire's pride shattered, a fleet destroyed, but the lesson had been learned for now.